I figured it was time for an update on the BigDelta, because I have done a good bit of changes so far, and I am in the middle of doing some more. Now, I have just realized that since this is actually printing right now, I cannot show you one of the bigger changes. But oh well, I'll settle with explaining it. So, this is going to replace a video I already have on my YouTube channel called My BigDelta. So I'm just going to introduce it and go through all the parts and with it again, because it's going to replace that. I don't want you to have to watch the old video and then this update video to see where I'm at. So I'm just going to do these sort of incrementally and present my BigDelta. Now, if I remember from the last video, my head is out of frame here. I will have to go down here to look into the camera. And I just saw these strips, which are from a long time ago. And I have to hold something on here. So those are going. Oopsie. There we go. So this is my BigDelta. I think it's called the BigDelta officially. There's been some pleas for a better name and more search engine friendly name, but sadly no, it's called the BigDelta. And if you want to learn more about it, Google BigDelta GitHub, or you can find links in the description. It's designed by a guy called Thews, T-H-E-W-S. So whenever you think I say Zeus, I'm saying Thews, basically. Yeah, so this is my BigDelta. It's obviously a delta and it's obviously big, so those two parts. Now, it's a printer I built because I previously had a very small budget printer, and I had that for 5 years. It taught me a lot, and it taught me that I was very tired of that printer and I wanted to build something easy to service, easier to get to, and this is where I landed. I knew I wanted to build a Delta because basically when you have this over here, you have the entire printer, because it's rotationally symmetric, which I really liked. So I asked on the RepRaps what printer I should get if I wanted to build a Delta, and I was told, well, build a BigDelta. So I did. Now, because the BigDelta is it's just a GitHub page with the bill of materials, and it's from the US, I had to adapt my bill of materials so that I could build it in Denmark. And that worked out pretty well, in my opinion. I put up my bill of materials on the GitHub. I've submitted a pull request and it's there now for you if you need that. But yeah, so let's go through the printer. It has a 400mm build area, the way I've set it up. The bed down there is 500mm in diameter, but because I don't really want to place it precisely centered, I restrict myself to a 400mm diameter circle. It can print to somewhere around 800mm height. I'm not entirely sure if it can go out to the full 400mm diameter at that height. I haven't tested it, I haven't ever printed that high, but it's nice to know that I can. So the files you'll find on the GitHub, and I'll go behind the camera so I can see what I'm actually filming now, which requires me stepping around the table. Now, so the parts that are printed and are from the GitHub are the vertices down there for the motors, and the vertices up here for the motors, and the carriages, which you can see moving up and down there, and the effector and the effector clamp. Now, did I forget anything? I probably did, I'm not entirely sure what. It's heavily based on OpenBuild's parts. As you can see, it's running on V-slots with OpenBuild's wheels and with their OpenBuild's end stops and such. Yeah. So parts I have added to this, the reason I'm making this update video. I have gone over to a new spool design, one of my own, which allows me to mount 3 spools up in the top. It's a very simple spool holder design. I'll move you in a bit closer if my tripod allows. There we go. Okay, you might be able to see that over there. No, that's horrible. Anyways, it's basically just a little holder for a threaded rod, and then I used some spool holders that fit on the threaded rod with the bearing in them off of Thingiverse. So that's one thing I updated with my 3D printer. Another thing I did is I got a new power supply, and that's one of the things I can't show you. So my China power supply died. Actually, that's up here. My China power supply just gave up the ghost. I nicked the fan from it and some other things, and yeah, so I got a new power supply. I decided, screw it, I'm gonna buy a proper power supply. And I bought a Meanwhile LRS 350-24. That's a 24 volt, 350 watts Meanwhile power supply from the LRS series, and that's a low profile power supply, which is actually pretty nice because that means it fits very, very well. Because as you might be able to see, the profiles in the bottom there are 40mm tall and then 20mm wide, so it's a 2040. But that means that the power supply entirely fits within that 40mm height. Yeah, I also got a 5 volt power supply, a separate 5 volt power supply, and that's why I have some dangling cables at the bottom and some up here at the top. I'm gonna be putting a soft power switch on it, which will allow me to push that and turn on 24 volts, and if I hold it, it'll turn off 24 volts, and it'll also turn off 5 volt power to the smoothie board, which is running it. Right, it's running a smoothie board. Just so I don't forget anything, let's go over the hardware. It's running a smoothie board 4XC, it's running a Raspberry Pi 3, running Octoprint, and I am going to be putting a touchscreen most likely on that Raspberry Pi 3 and mounting it up top as a sort of panel running Octoprint with Touch UI, because I really like how that Touch UI looks. Right, so that's the hardware. Right, and I'm running Radom 17 something stepper motors. Nothing special there. So, right, I want to implement a soft power feature, and that's why I have that separate 5 volt power supply. That separate 5 volt power supply will power the Raspberry Pi only, and it will only power the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi will then have, with some PCBs I've made, the ability to turn off the 220 volt for the 24 volt supply, and will also have the ability to cut power from the USB feed to the smoothie board, just so I can turn everything off if I want to. That's all going to be controlled by some software I'm going to have to write on the Pi, and because I don't have the PCBs yet, or a lot of the other things, that's still on the drawing board. It's not there yet. Right, so another upgrade I made. Actually, I am printing part of it right now. I'll go get something. So, I bought some, I had some issues with when I was printing at late at night, like now. My neighbor in there was not too happy, so I had to cancel my print, which I wasn't happy about, but I mean, I can see how that could be absolutely maddening with the high acceleration that this printer can do, with the knocks it would put into the floor and into the next apartment. So I hadn't thought about that, but I had to cancel my print, wasted a lot of plastic, wasted a lot of time. That was very annoying, so I decided I wanted to fix that. So I bought some Sorbothane by recommendation off of eBay. Now this is Sorbothane with some foam tape on it, just because I find this foam tape is actually very good well, yeah, just very good. It's because foam tape has a thickness to it, it will actually conform around things and give a better contact. I've been told that the foam does like to deteriorate over time, so we'll see. If it does so, I'll just switch over to use standard double-sided tape, carpet tape, because the carpet tape is, well, it's fairly resilient. Another upgrade I've done, and that's not quite as obvious, but take you off the tripod. I'm sorry, but I'll have to. And I'll try and avoid getting you caught in the... So, I have had I went to the hackerspace. Whoops, that's the autofocus. Trying to drag you around. I went to the hackerspace and I got a wooden bottom, an MDF bottom laser cut on the hackerspace's big laser cutter, and some MDF spaces up here, and then I printed some corners over there. That allows me to have cables coming out of the vertexes and going into the basement here. And here you'll see my Sobothane foot as well. You'll see that actually completely crushed the foam tape, but the Sobothane is still holding up great. The Sobothane is a special kind of rubber, and I know there's not enough light down there, but I don't really have anything I can do to fix that. So I'll just put you back up on the tripod. Now, this printer is fairly heavy, so that's why I went for the 4mm Sobothane. But the Sobothane is actually holding up very well, much better than expected, honestly. This is... something's wrong. Why is this not fitting my tripod anymore? There we go. Okay, so... right. So a Sobothane on the feet. I'm printing a 4th foot right now, and that's where this is supposed to go. So that means I would have support in each corner and one in the middle. Now, the mounts I've made there are actually made to take foam tape on the top and be screwed into the MDF plate, just because I want this to be very easy to move around. Well, as easy as something as heavy and big as this can be to move around. Now, that brings me to a second thing. If you're going to build a BigDelta, do not put the electronics at the bottom. For some reason, that's just become what you do with Delta printers. And honestly, you will save... I think I did the math, and with my particular setup with a 24 volt power supply, a 12 volt fan, a probe on the hot end and such, you will save 27 meters of cable if you put the electronics in the top. Because right now I have to run all of the cables going for the hot end, and that's 8 cables. That's ground, 24 volt, 12 volt, ground for the part cooling fan, ground for the hot end, 2 thermistor leads and a sensor pin. Was that all? Maybe? Yeah, I think that was all. And then 4 cables for the extruder up there as well. Then I have to run, that's a little more than a 3 meter run, because that has to go 1.5 meters up, 1.5 meters down again. So call it 4 meter run. 4 meters times 12. So you already have, well, times 6, because that's half of it. So that's how much you're already saving there. Now you'll also be saving quite a lot of cable runs on the end stops, because those sit in the top. That's about 2 meters, well, less than 2 meters, but around that per end stop, times 3, because, well, because of the long cable runs, I decided to run mine without pull-ups. I decided to run mine with 5 volt and ground wired up alongside signal pins. Let me see if I can zoom in on that up there. It just likes to turn down the exposure. Wow, that's weird. Maybe I just don't understand cameras. I probably don't. I guess zooming in means you need more light. I don't know. I need to learn how to use this camera properly. Anyways, because that basically means that when the end stop isn't clicked, it's connected directly to 5 volt, and when it is clicked, it's connected directly to ground. So that means it's less susceptible to noise. You wouldn't really need that for this setup, and you would especially not need it if you went with the electronics in the top. So that will be an upgrade I will never do, because I don't need to anymore, but if I had to build another one of these, that would be the way I would go with that. Anything else to mention? Nothing I can come up with. Right. So yeah, this is my BigDelta, and oh right, I I have not mentioned that at all. I have a separate video on that, but I might as well just do that in this video. I knew I'd forgotten something. So, yeah, it goes instantly dark. That's interesting. I guess it has to do with the hot end. So, what you see there is my extruder. Well, I say my extruder. It's designed by Thus again. It uses a NEMA 11 stepper motor because this has to be light. The reason we have this kind of extruder is because otherwise I'd have to run a 1.5 meter Bowden tube, and that would be hell to run. It would just give so many issues. So instead I have this short run of Bowden tube right here, and then this should actually be bungee tubes, but I couldn't find any here in Denmark, and well, I decided to just buy PVC tubing and then suspend them by springs in the end. And this is a suspended extruder, and it basically is suspended from the carriages around here, which don't move as much as the hot end. So that means the full weight is not moving around as much as it would if it was a direct extruder. And deltas don't handle that well because the effector has to be lightweight. But it's still carried by the extruders, and it's still by the carriages, and it's still moving, so it still has to be light. But suspending it like this means you can get away with actually having an extruder suspended, well, above the hot end. And to go light, the designer Thus decided to go with this NEMA 11 motor, so it's a tiny motor, with a 27:1 gear reduction on it. It's a fairly expensive motor, but it's pretty damn good. I mean, this extruder has not failed me yet. It's pretty awesome. And then on the front here, it's the V4 of the extruders that Thus, I think that Thus has designed. There might have been some other people involved, I'm not entirely sure. Anyways, it uses these John Guest fittings that I'm absolutely in love with. They're really difficult, if not impossible, to get in Denmark. I got some samples from John Guest themselves, that's how I got mine, and I haven't been able to find anywhere where you can buy less than 1,000 yet. So yeah, unless you want to buy 1,000 of these, and they're £1 each. I think I found them on an English website for £1 each at 1,000 a quantity. So yeah, that'll be quite a lot of money spent just on fittings. Right, but they're absolutely awesome. The extruder here has an arm that presses towards a Tatsu V2 gear. That's also an expensive part, but again, it's been well worth it so far. The reason the Tatsu V2 gear is used mainly is that it's one of the few reputable brands of extruder gears which have a 6mm bore, and that's because the axle coming out of the planetary gearbox is a 6mm axle. So yeah, that's one of the reasons it's used. Another reason it's used is it's absolutely awesome. But yeah, so then inside the arm part, and let's just see if this focuses. Inside the arm part there's a metal tube like this. I've milled up quite a bit of them just to be able to send to people who need them. And this metal tube, well, some people have experimented with just using a PTFE inside of the arm there, but they've all had issues with the PTFE rotating. So the extruder is actually meant to take a metal tube like this where there's a slot milled out, and then the filament comes down here, and then right where the gear is, that's where the slot is, and then that is spring-loaded towards the gear. This is not cleaned up yet. I just made a lot of them, I haven't cleaned them up yet. But yeah, that's what's inside the arm. I haven't had mine rotate yet. I think that's because of burrs on the metal tube keeping it in place. But hey, if it works, if that's what makes it work, then it's not a flaw, then it's a feature, in my opinion. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching, and yeah, this is my BigDelta.